Falling short. Issues of Uncle J.
So how was your date last night? Asked Carl after I walked in and sat in front of my computer. Let's just say I won't be seeing her again, I said, going through sport updates. I don't understand. This was your third date and last week you went to church with her. First of all, when I met up with her for the first time, I kind of thought she was Raz. Raz? It's a Nigerian word for which the closest interpretation I can find for is ghetto. So she's African ghetto and nothing. After all, no one is perfect, especially me. So what's the problem? We go out yesterday, and like with the rest of the date, she never even attempts to pay for anything. Dude, you're the man. I know, but I kind of sense this spirit of take, and no give. What else? After salsa dancing, we end up at a Chinese restaurant, and for most of it, we were having a laugh. Then her phone rings, and I notice the caller ID being Fola CC. And Fola CC means Fola from Christian Connection. The dating website. Exactly. What does she do? She answers the phone and tells him that she will call him back. What do you do? I act like I didn't notice anything. I see. Anyway, she proceeds to ask me if I find her attractive. What did you say? Even though the first thing that came to mind was that I found her kind of Raz, I answer, I think you're cute. Then what happens? I ask her the same question. What does she say? She proceeds to tell me that she doesn't like my aftershave or the way I dress. Wow. She goes on to say that she prefers me on the phone, but me being a Christian counts for a lot, but would like to see me work on the other things. How did you respond? I told her it wasn't that deep, and I'm not looking for someone to settle for me, and there are women who will take me just the way I am. Then what happened? I took her home without my usual extrovert energy and charm. What did she do? She tried to joke around with me, and in return I kind of gave her a subtle cold shoulder. How did she react? Well, at one point we get in the car, right? Then she says that she's not closing her door until I smile. Then what? I don't say anything, I just start the car. Is it? She then says, you're not even gonna say, please baby, close the door. Really? Then I say, you're Fola's baby, not my baby. Snap. She's quiet for the rest of the ride home, while I'm now singing along to the radio, and when we arrive, goes into her home without saying a word. Ouch. This morning, as I'm getting into the car with my breakfast, she calls. And says what? She apologizes. That's good. Wait. I ask her, why is she apologizing? And her answer? I don't know. What do you say? I ask her, what do you mean you don't know? To which she replies, well, we went out last night, we're having a good time, and all of a sudden you went into a bad mood. Joker. I then ask, is that your assessment of what happened last night? And then she says, if it's about Fola, he's a guy I was speaking to before I met you who lives in Newcastle. Joker. I then ask again, is that your assessment of what happened last night? And finally she says, yes. Then what did you say? I said, thank you for your apology, for at the very least it shows you have a desire to honor people, but I'm not the guy for you. Classy. She then says, let's talk about it at the very least. We can salvage a friendship. And your response? I reminded her about my philosophy I adopted of marry your friend, and then added the fact that me not being the guy for her meant we are not friends and will never be friends. Deep. She then says, okay, but we could end up hanging out with each other in the future. And I say, last night was the last time we will ever hang out with each other. Yikes. She tried to continue, but I stopped her saying I was busy and there was really nothing more to say. I have to say, that was pretty civilized for you. Thank you. But you were talking to about 5 women while seeing her. I was, but I didn't answer the phone to one of them and say I will call you back in front of her, despite the fact that my phone was constantly vibrating in my pocket. Plus, I didn't proceed to list all her faults when she asked me if I found her attractive. Point taken, but you should have explained in detail why you were upset with her when she called this morning. Episode 19, my lack of innocence. From a very young age, I've been in love with sci-fi and fantasy adventures. I'm just fond of the age-old battle between good and evil, with a fantastical element to it. I'm not alone, hence the whole genre of sci-fi and fantasy having a massive following, be it through franchises like Marvel, DC and Disney, or through summer blockbusters in general. People just love the idea of good triumphing over evil, against all odds. I guess that's why characters like Batman are so beloved. Despite having no superpowers, he's able to take on villains with extraordinary abilities and gain the respect of the likes of Superman. Whether you're into sci-fi and fantasy or not, from a very young age we are bombarded with tales of heroes of all kinds, defeating evil of all kinds, which is why many of us look at our lives and automatically make ourselves heroes in it. Making ourselves good while everything bad thrown at us are byproducts of evil forces. However, a lot of the time this is not the case. If we look at our lives from a non-biased perspective, we will find that a lot of the time not only are we not innocent, but a lot of times we are actually the villain in our own story. Now, whether you agree with me or not, as far as you're concerned, I can definitely say this notion applies to me. Yes, I have been a victim of abuse and neglect throughout my life, but I look around and see many people who have suffered far more than I, do a lot more with their lives in terms of walking in love and just being good to people around them. I remember watching the movie As Good As It Gets, where the Jack Nicholson character states that what bothers us as human beings a lot of the time is not that we face hard times, but the fact that while we're having bad times, others seem to be having it good. I can definitely relate to this notion, because a lot of the time in my life, I felt lost, left out and worthless. And while this was happening, it seemed that everyone around me were loved and all in all had it all together. Oftentimes, I find myself thinking, God, why didn't you instill in me the current level of wisdom much earlier? Then my Almighty Father responds with scriptures that highlight the fact that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And that when you're faithful with a little, then you can be faithful with a lot. And then he relates these scriptures to the fact that from a very early age, not only did I know right from wrong, but I was aware of heaven and hell, and the requirement needed to get there, even if it was in a simplistic format. Yet with this information, which effortlessly grew over the years, I chose to give into selfish desires that will always be contrary with the will of God, hence bringing nothing but calamity on myself in many ways. Yes, I was a victim of abuse and neglect in many ways, but growing up I was clothed, fed, educated, and most importantly, exposed to the truth of the salvation through Jesus Christ, which is far more than a lot of other people started with. Am I saying parents providing food, clothing, and shelter is a license to mistreat their children? Of course not. But what I am saying is, we as human beings need to make the most of what we're given, to be a blessing to the world around us. If I had done all I can to embrace and apply this truth, there is no doubt in my mind I would have been immune from a lot, if not all, the attacks that came my way through colleagues, acquaintances, friends, and family. And in fact, I would have been an effective tool for God to reach my enemy in those times of attacks. I think back to my decision to give up the opportunity to fight professionally in the sport of MMA, for reasons that included lack of support, depression, and stress. But ultimately, it came down to laziness and an unwillingness to sacrifice with regards to dieting. This episode can serve as the perfect analogy for all the times I was defeated. Another perfect analogy can be my love life, as I can blame past failed relationships on ex-girlfriends letting me down or devaluing me, when a lot of my past relationships failing can be put on me not being patient, forgiving, or loving enough. This is why Jesus talked about turning the other cheek, because part of truly walking in love is about leaving the room for people to be imperfect, while focusing on how much you can love them. My failure to effectively adopt this mindset is the reason why I've been unable to properly manage platonic relationships, as I'm always hiding or distancing myself from people to avoid getting hurt. Why? Because I'm focusing on what I can get too much of the time, instead of being patient, loving, pursuing peace, and being willing to sacrifice my ego, pride, and selfish ambition for well-being of others. Honoring God at all times in all things is directly linked to not dishonoring people at all times in all things, and in this area I have failed too much of the time. Nowadays I really try to take on board these facts, understanding that I'm very finite as a person. I aim to walk in love as much as possible every single day, knowing it's not by power or might but by the Spirit of the Lord. We all need to count our blessings and embrace a spirit of gratitude, because for every one thing you can complain about, there are hundreds of things to be grateful for.
Falling Short complete series can be found on JOMAJ Studios YouTube channel. Falling Short is also available in paperback book format or on Kindle. To get your copy, email jomajstudios@gmail.com. That's jomajstudios@gmail.com.